That's fine.
Thank you, buddy. Chris Denary from the Pacers.
Awesome.
All right. We're ready to go. Here we go. Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Thursday, and it is always a great time to welcome in a special guest. Yesterday we had Derek Mobley with us. Today, another IU grad that is killing it on the national scene, Courtney Cronin. You see her in a lot of different places. Of course, her main gig is for ESPN with the Bears, but it's on the, daggone it, what's the afternoon show? I'm forgetting.
Around the Horn.
Around the Horn, and many things like that. But it has to be fun getting to do so many different things.
Yeah, it is. And it kind of gives you the ability to scratch the itch. Like, I cover the NFL. That's my day job. I'm fully entrenched in the Bears and the National Football League. But then to get to venture outside of that, and my Sunday morning radio show is so college football heavy. I feel like we do like a little bit of NFL, but it's, a chance to really dive into what we're seeing on Saturdays. And of course, Around the Horn and some of the other national things I do get to incorporate a little bit of everything. So it really is a great happy medium where I get to, constantly have, be in the mix and talking about things that are beyond my quote unquote day job of covering the Bears.
And so I didn't even realize, and you have a radio show, so you got going on. Who is that for? Is that on ESPN's network?
That is, yeah. It's on the national network. We're in a bunch of different cities on Sunday morning, 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. It's called Best Week Ever. So it's myself, my co-host Peter Burns. It's one of the longest standing shows on the network, and we are super college football heavy. That's Peter's wheelhouse. He's an anchor for the SEC network. And so for the first 2 hours of that show, we're just ripping through the games from the previous night, the biggest storylines from the week in college football. And then kind of the end is where we spin into it's the NFL, what's coming up today. And then the second I'm done with that show, I just book it and I go straight to whatever game I have to go to cover.
Well, fortunately for you, you've probably gotten the opportunity to talk about the Indiana Hoosiers quite a bit this year, shockingly to a lot of people. But it's not over yet either. But, man, what an incredible run as they'll welcome in Michigan this weekend as a 14.5-point favorite. Another crazy stat. Going for their 10th win, another thing that they've never achieved. But I try to – I went to Indiana as well, but I try to always keep a wall there. It's hard to do at certain times, but and sometimes you can let a little of it in, but it has to be a blast getting to do that.
Yeah, it's neat. And especially as a grad and as far removed as I am, I graduated in 2012. I was like you, like when I was a student and I was covering football, men's basketball for student television, like I was not a fan. I would not let myself be a fan. I was going to cover it on the straight and narrow. I wasn't going to take a game off from covering it to go then be a fan. I did not see that as like I was trying to be a capital J journalist, trying to do it the right way. So now that I don't have any coverage ties to IU, I don't cover college football for ESPN the way that some of our reporters do. I just get to talk about it on radio. Now I'm all in. And it wasn't just this year. I think that it's, I knew Tom Allen pretty well from my time in Mississippi covering Ole Miss. I followed the team for years when the expectation was nowhere close to where it is right now. So to see this team at 9-0, looking at 10-0, square in the face is a very realistic possibility. This week is awesome. Like it makes you such a proud alum to see that Indiana is being known as something, excuse me, more than just a basketball school. And like people nationally are getting to like tap into that and see that this is a program that hopefully is sustainable beyond this year. I think the jury is going to be out on that. And that's going to be the big question mark nationally about Kurt Signetti, the recruiting, the transfer portal. Like is this just a flash in the pan because he brought everybody with him from JMU, or is there some staying power here? But in the right now, it's awesome. I get to wake up on Saturday mornings, watch College Game Day. They're talking about my school, which just never happened. Like it never, ever happened.
And unless they were just here.
Yeah. Like, and it's, to see, I got to see him at Northwestern earlier in the week, earlier in the year. I got to see them in Bloomington when they played Charlotte. I did not make it down for college game day because I had to be in Washington to cover the Bears. So that was a bummer. But I told myself, when they go to the Big Ten championship game, that's when I'll get to go see them again in person.
And I'm on record. I think that happens. I think that I don't want to get ahead of myself. Well, heck, I don't care. I'm not coaching or playing, so I can. I do think that I think they upset Ohio State. I just think that they're a more complete team. It's a tough place to win. Don't get me wrong. But so is Penn State, and Ohio State did it. All these things are possible if you're doing the way that they're doing them. But we'll see. They've got a big game this weekend. As I said, they're a 14.5-point favorite over Michigan. I don't think that they've ever been a favorite over Michigan, period, much less 2 scores. So that's crazy. Memorial Stadium sold out with 90% red probably, which that's never happened prior to last game.
Yeah, it's been like to see that on TV and the crowd shots. Like, really, I think people got a feel for how cool that stadium can look when it's filled up. When IU played Nebraska, like that was like, I hope to see that. That's not a flash in the pan. That students will continue to come out and be there for games and to stay till the very end. Like they stayed until the bitter end of that game. I know that Nebraska was kind of putting together a fake comeback, fake rally there in the fourth quarter, but that game was not close.
No,
that game did not have that sort of feel. And, I guess what scares me a little bit is that I think from here on out, outside of Purdue, because Purdue's terrible this year, I'm going to have a feeling that every game is a trap game. Like I felt it with Michigan State when I was watching that on the plane when I was on my way to Phoenix last week, because that's the Bears played the Cardinals. And I see Michigan State go up 10-0. I'm like, oh no, is this going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? Finally, they get caught in their in their tracks, and then of course they go and rattle off 47 unanswered. This team can frankly compete with anybody. I know the strength of schedule argument is one that's going to be made when they made the initial CFP rankings at number 8, and if they are able to stay in there, but You're playing the teams that are in front of you and you're dominating them. These aren't close games. These are games that you're winning with your backup quarterback too against a really good defense. So I'm not like overly concerned about their viability as a playoff team. And I think that they have a very good shot at this point to host a playoff game, which if that happens, I feel like no matter what, I'm going to have to try to make my way down to Bloomington for that.
Absolutely. I think that they, at worst, hopefully they will host a playoff game, which, wow, are we getting into crazy territory of conversations that I never thought I'd have. I was in school during the Mallory era, which that was fun, but this is just a whole different stratosphere, which is great. I want to talk more about you now in your career. Where are you originally from?
I'm from the Chicagoland area. I'm from Glenview, so just north of the city. I live in the city now. And, I think I was one of 26 from my high school that went to IU in 2008.
Well, you can catch us each day up there. All the people in Chicagoland on WJOB, the voice of the region, 12:30 a.m., 104.7 FM. They cover the entire Chicagoland area, so that's great. There are lots of IU fans there. It's the number 2 market for Indiana as far as graduates.
It's wild. Like, so my family, they're big Northwestern people. They have season tickets for football, season tickets for men's hoops. So anytime there's an Indiana game, I always get my own ticket and I tag along. And to see a couple weeks ago when Indiana played in the makeshift stadium on the lakefront, which was such a cool environment, like that was a really well done job by Northwestern to have the feel of the lake right there, to have a more intimate stadium. But that stadium was, dare I say, like 60% red. It was cool. Like we take over stadiums when we're here in Chicago, whether it's, I know that there have been games that they've played at the United Center for hoops. And of course the IU Northwestern games at Welsh Ryan, like those are some of the coolest environments because they're smaller stadiums, but there's so many Hoosier fans in this area. I call it Chicago's real Big Ten team. I know that Northwestern has tried to latch on to that branding. That was a Jim Phillips thing, and that Illinois, just because they're an in-state institution, right, I don't think gives them the right to that. But it is remarkable, like how many people went to IU Bloomington that I work with, like on a daily basis. There's a huge contingency like in the Chicago media landscape as well, which I think is just reflective of the IU Media School, which Dr. Galen Clavio, who was my mentor and my professor as well, has done an unbelievable job building us up as one of the premier schools that you go to if you want to be a journalist, and if you want to work on air, if you want to write, if you want to do all these things. So it's cool to see the growth coinciding with like the growth of the sports teams as well, like getting a more national look at the university and what people nationally think of it.
Yeah, and people have no idea how many of us IU grads there are out there that are in this business. It would probably blow a lot of people's minds, especially the ones like yourself who are at an even higher level. There's a lot of Derek Mobley is a name that probably a lot of people don't know. For one, he's been in ESPN for 34 years, but he's also behind the scenes. But he's worked with some of the great, he's worked with Keith Jackson, for God's sakes. I mean, that you can stop right there. I'm like, oh, wow. You got Joe Buck, who him and Troy Aikman, they're chatting about Indiana up on each Monday Night Football, which Derek is the director of, which is cool. But yeah, it's awesome to see. Even Sage Steele no longer working in the industry, but another well-known one of those faces. And then how did you get guided towards what you're doing? Is this something when you came out of high school? I was fortunate, went to Floyd Central in Southern Indiana, and we had a radio station, the state's oldest radio station. And I wanted to do that. And then once I got up to IU, I was like, that's probably a pipe dream. I had an education. I was in education and was probably not spending enough time not out at night as I should have been, and was invited to find a different major. But actually ended up taking a class that was taught by Kit Klingelhofer, the SID at the time, because I knew who he was, and that led to a summer job as an SID for the All-Star football game, which kind of brought me back around to what I'd wanted to do. So it worked out great like that. But you came in and had that goal and that vision.
Yeah, I had a similar like upbringing in that. I did radio in high school. WGBK at Glenbrook South High School in Glenview, Illinois gave me my start at 14 years old. And I was like, I kind of like doing this. We called football games, boys and girls basketball. We did baseball. We had radio shows during the week. So it gave me a very early look into something that I wanted to be a part of. And of course, growing up in this media landscape in the number 3 market in the country, got me exposure to that early on. I was a huge Cubs fan growing up. I love the Bulls. And I had a chance to be like, I could do that one day. I think I could be in this market and do that. So I went from IU. I had a post-grad internship at the NCAA in digital communications right after college. From there, went down to Mississippi, which has a big IU to like all places in Mississippi pipeline that I kind of kickstarted back in 2012, 2013. And I was down there for 3 years. I covered everything from high school sports to recruiting to SEC football. From there, went out to the Bay Area to start covering pro teams for the first time when I covered the Warriors and the Raiders and 49ers, and then fell into the NFL out there. So I spent 5 years in Minnesota after that covering the Minnesota Vikings, and then got down to Chicago in 2022 to start covering the Bears. And it's been a wild ride ever since. My role has expanded a lot. I think the market size has a lot to do with that and the opportunity that has presented itself to me that I've taken advantage of. And it's been great. Like it's one of the best media markets in the country, because no matter if the teams are good or if they're bad, you're still going to get people talking about it on a daily basis. You're going to have very rabid sports fan energy 24/7. And I think that's what makes Chicago a place that's unlike any other, where people don't just give up on teams if they're bad. Like they want to know why they're bad, and they want like accountability and coach firings and changes from the very start of any losses.
Yeah, while I consider Indianapolis the greatest sports city in America, Chicago is probably the greatest centralized place, because you have pro sports with the NBA, the NFL, the NHL. You've got the Big Ten located there. Not only do you have Illinois, Northwestern, you basically have IU as well. So they have a gigantic confluence of college teams as well. And women in sports, Indiana, again, huge in that area. You're obviously one of those that have achieved great things. Why are some of the females that are coming out of Indiana having so much success? We just talked about the ladies that are heading over. Well, one of them's already there at KMOV. Did Grace just go there, Ybarra?
Yeah, Grace Ibarra was at WCBI, which was a station in Mississippi in Columbus, and she is now going to that station that you just mentioned in St. Louis.
Which is very, very cool to see. And it's the opportunities that continue, but that helps with Indiana as well. I talk about this football team and the exposure they're getting, whether it's on Pat McAfee show or the Fox Noon kickoff or the big BTN or whomever. There is not a day that goes by that somebody is not talking about Indiana football. And that in and of itself is something that Indiana couldn't afford to buy if they wanted to, that amount of advertising and exposure.
Yeah, and it's really cool. I think it's going to do numbers. We'll see at the end of the season and the effect that that's going to have on enrollment in, the upcoming years. But, when I was a journalism student, I went through the Ernie Pyle School of Journalism. Like, everything was so segregated. If you wanted to write, you were in the journalism school. If you wanted to do anything on TV, you were taking classes in Hyper through IU Sport Communication. Telecom was on an island by itself. The radio kids were on an island by themselves. So I think
my degree's in speech communication.
Yeah, they needed somebody to, converge all of these different things and put it under one roof, which is what Dr. Clavio did.
How long has he been there now?
Long time. So I know he was a student there in the early 2000s, went to get his doctorate degree, his graduate degrees. He went to Miami, came back to Indiana, got a doctorate degree at IU, and he's been back in Bloomington officially, like for good, since 2009. So I met him my sophomore year. And he's just done a tremendous job building that program to what it is now, to where you have, there's competition for student media gigs. Like, they have an interview process if you want to be part of the Hoosier network, if you want to be part of IUS TV or any of these other entities that are underneath the jurisdiction of the media school. And I think that's really cool, because when it was, when I was a student, 2008,
it's real life for one thing.
It is. And they're getting real opportunities, like some of the class opportunities that they get. Mike Wells, who was, a long time, figurehead in the Indianapolis media landscape. Like, he's teaching a class now that his students have gotten to go cover All-Star Weekend in Indianapolis. They got to cover a Colts game earlier this year. It's remarkable the sort of real world access you get and experience you get when you're still a student. A lot of that did not exist when I was there, but to see the direction the program has gone, to see the direction that Dr. Clavio has pushed it in, I think it makes it like, we're on par with Syracuse, with Missouri, with Northwestern. I don't want to hear about those schools as like the only good journalism schools to go to, when Indiana is constantly producing top tier talent. And like, you can look across my network, you can look across other networks, and trace a lot of people back to Bloomington for where they got their start.
Absolutely. And that will continue. And it's great to see, except for when you work in this market now, there's a lot of students you've got to go through, because they are out there in ample. But yeah, it's so many different opportunities, whether it's through WTIU, the TV side, the guys calling games or writing. There is a multiple, and you look at people like Derek Mobley, who went the other direction. So there are so many different opportunities in this business, and it continues to grow. As we've got streaming platforms now, which I know everybody kind of hates, but it is what it is. We are consuming things in different ways, whether it's print media or visual media, and it's you either adjust or you don't. But it's great to see all of the people that came from a place that you did. And it also tells people that, hey, there's a chance. Because when back, of course, it was a long time ago, but I was like, this is a pipe dream for me. And I kind of backed off of it for a minute until that happenstance of that job came along. But it's also people like you that already have the vision and are strong in that belief of what you want to do and that follow through, because that takes commitment no matter what it is.
For sure. And I think that that's, a huge part of why I've been able to go from place to place and, continue on with my dream and my career. And it's, I have Bloomington to thank for that. Like, I would not be where I am had I not gotten the education and gotten the real world experience as a student. I think that's the most important thing I try to relay to students whenever I'm either teaching in Bloomington or speaking to students in classes. Like, you have to put in the work, and you have an incredible backdrop to do it in a place like Bloomington, but also like the greater Indianapolis sports landscape as well. As there's too much opportunity to not take advantage of.
Absolutely. What are you looking forward to this weekend? I know, who do the Bears play this weekend?
They have the Patriots. So they're home. They now start a 3-game stretch of home games, which is needed because they've been on the road a lot. They were London, Washington, Arizona the last couple of weeks with a bye sprinkled in there. So it's an important game for a team that's 4-4 right now, that has lost their last 2. And of course the Hail Mary still being talked about, but just the way that they could not get off the mat last week against the Cardinals, they need this one. So that's a big one. And I'm looking forward to college football on Saturday, seeing Indiana handle business against Michigan to go to 10-0, to see where they're ranked next week when the CFP puts out their second set of rankings on Tuesday. I'm really excited about that.
Thoughts of their first ranking, number 8, although they're in the 9th slot. It's going to change multiple times over the weeks coming.
I understand it from a strength of schedule perspective. I do think there is a little bit of that bias there, because if you put on Indiana tape and you watch these games, you see that none of it's close. Like, they're outscoring opponents at an insane clip. Outside of what we saw last week against Michigan, they're outscoring teams like from the very jump in the first quarter, setting the tone. I'm really impressed with the fact that they're even in the conversation, but now that they are, you're going to get people who think that they deserve to be ranked higher. And I think that they have a valid case. Like, you can't tell me Penn State, they beat Illinois when Illinois was 19. And I know the committee looks at it and says, oh, well, they went to USC. They won in overtime. And Drew Aller had a great game.
USC is 15th in the Big Ten right now.
Yeah. Like, they're not the team that they were. They weren't that team when Penn State played them. And then they go to Wisconsin and they're trying to hide their quarterback. I don't know, the way that they played against Ohio State.
They beat Bowling Green by just a touchdown.
Yeah, they're a good team. They're not a great team. So I think that, like, when we want to bring up the strength of schedule argument, like, go look at Penn State's schedule. They played one good team. And Indiana's going to have their chance to play one good team. When they play Ohio State. And well, fine. If you want to you can throw in Illinois and Ohio State, but they lost to Ohio State. And that game really wasn't as close as the score indicates, because they get down inside the goal line twice, the 5-yard line, and couldn't punch it in. So I think if we're talking about, like, the best teams in college football, Penn State doesn't hold a candle. Like, if you're truly looking at, like, the way that they're winning games versus the way that Indiana's winning games, they don't hold a candle to IU. So I'm curious to see how these next 3 weeks of the season, before, the bowl, all this stuff is set, like, in stone, and we know who's hosting games and who's traveling where in that first round. I think these are really important weeks, and I'm really excited to tune in and watch them.
I cannot wait as well. Courtney, I am so excited and appreciative that you took the time to join us today. I know you have 1,000 things going on, whether it's a radio show or covering the Bears or getting around the horn and whatever else that you're not doing yet that we probably don't know about. But look forward to maybe hopefully doing this again in December when the college football playoff picture is more defined as well. It's been an honor to get to have you on, and look forward to it. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You betcha. Courtney Cronin from ESPN joining us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio.